rise in the need for social emotional skills and community building relationships within the classroom?
I've wavered with my connection and my purpose as wanting to be an educator and working with kids.
Like a check mark or a smiley face. And it was simple things to acknowledge that the way he's feeling is important.
Allows kids from any culture, any background to develop.
Welcome to Premium Quality Ideas, the podcast where innovative educators share ideas that are tried and true and will inspire you. I'm your host, Christina Kottmann, coming to you from beautiful Brazil with 9 years of international teaching experience and a lot of curiosity about the future of education. Today's innovative educator is Michaela Sands. She has taught in culturally diverse classrooms in Brazil, Morocco, Thailand, and the United States. Michaela champions social emotional learning and relationship-driven growth within communities. Also, she is a rain or shine distance runner. Welcome, Michaela.
Thank you so much, Christina. It's nice to be here with you.
Yeah, thanks for being my first podcast guest.
Woo-hoo! Exciting.
So, I wonder, how did you get involved in the adventure that we call education?
That's an interesting question. In fifth grade, I had a teacher. Her name was Mrs. Nix. And Mrs. Nix was the most patient, kind, and inviting person. And all I wanted to do was please her and make her love me. And seeing her demeanor with myself and my peers really inspired me to want to become a teacher as well.
Is there something you remember that this teacher did that really stood out and you wanted to emulate in your own classroom?
Mrs. Nix was so soft-spoken and her voice was always calm. And coming from a house that can be kind of loud, I really enjoyed how she spoke quietly and firmly, but kindly.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I think about how when I've walked into your classroom in second grade, you're always calm and feeling like this go-to space where if a kid needs a hug, they can just go up to Mrs. Sands.
It doesn't always feel that way, but thank you.
Speaking of school communities, how have you felt that you've contributed to the schools that you've worked at? Because you've worked at several different places around the world.
I think a lot of it starts with understanding the community in which you find yourself and getting to know them, getting to know the students, the families, the teachers. So when I taught in Thailand, that was my first experience, and it was kind of like a grant to go and teach English in a rural village. And so language was a barrier. But I made an effort to get to know my fellow teachers with the very little Thai I knew, a lot of gestures and dancing and smiling,
Yeah.
and the same with the kids. And I think each opportunity I've had at the other schools I've worked in, I've continued to grow as an educator, but also as a human, in the sense that I've recognized, that we all will fail and that we all are not perfect and we need to embrace those imperfections. And I think that is something I've brought to the communities in which I found myself. Willingness to make mistakes, willingness to talk to students about my emotions and my reactions, willingness to apologize, and just embracing this adventure we call life.
The perfect way to introduce social emotional learning, because it's all about recognizing that nobody's perfect. Everyone's on their own journey. We're all trying to be more self-aware of our outward and our inward feelings and how we present. And yeah, if you're already understanding that as a teacher in a different culture, that must be so much more powerful for your learners.
Totally. And I think the most valuable part of the whole experience is being vulnerable. And I think my openness to try to become more vulnerable has expanded over time. But I think that also encourages like our colleagues. We worked together in Brazil and we were very open to talking about our successes and celebrations and how we're feeling. And the more we can do that, I think the stronger our communities can become.
Yeah. And it's that attitude of saying, yes, I will try, even if I'm not good at it, even if I look like a fool, but it's not going to, damage me internally. I remember when you were kind of leading the student ambassadors and kind of got up on stage in front of the entire elementary school and said, we're going to do this chant and led everyone through it. That stands out as a moment of vulnerability and confidence because you're modeling to our students, I believe in something, I'm going to try it. And when we're talking about social emotional learning, it's really impactful when students see models. They see their teachers reading, they see their teachers making mistakes. I've made mistakes in math class and the kids call me out for it. But it's
Exactly.
better that they don't see me as this perfect vessel of knowledge. I'm just as human as them.
Totally. The amount of oopsies and head slaps we did for Miss Sands, Miss Michaela, it makes me feel good inside. It warms my heart. Like you said, it shows them how we can take ownership and that we are in this shared experience together.
Exactly. Thinking about the different cultures, because we both taught in very different cultures, and sometimes the students' expectations of how they show that they need support or they're confused, they're very different than what we learned as Americans. So, how have you come across that, and how has that been a challenge when you're teaching in such different areas?
I think it takes getting to know each child, which takes time and is sometimes frustrating because you want to be able to help every child immediately. That's not life.
Yeah.
So, in establishing a safe and positive learning community, which we do through morning meetings, we do through activities, games, cheers, we do through circle discussions, through read alouds, um, and taking the time to kind of have little meet and greets or check-in chats with kids when they're not doing academic work along with when they are. I think
Mhm.
that's how we learn kind of what they need and what they are available to give in that moment. If they're not available for learning or if they're having trouble, we can then reflect on how we can better support them in the future.
Mm-hmm. I think about a student I had in first grade who did not have any English at that point, and we kind of created a schedule for his day. And the way he would communicate if he was doing well, like feeling okay, was he would do like a check mark or a smiley face. And it was simple things to acknowledge that the way he's feeling is important. I can't ask him to sit through a math class when he's feeling stressed and tired or he's feeling overwhelmed because it's all in English, you know? But if he could communicate, like, yeah, it was a good day, at least coming to school every day did not feel taxing for him in that way because he was also struggling to make friendships. He was struggling to understand where to go in the cafeteria.
Yeah. And I think we've both been in situations and circumstances where we are working with a lot of English language learners. And there's such a beauty of being able to communicate and connect despite language barriers. I
Mm-hmm.
think we've both learned how to, learn some of their native language to make them feel welcome and to reach out to their families and to research parts of their culture or books that might show that and they might connect to parts of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
And we really try to bring that in. And also, like you said, especially the the few months I tried to learn Portuguese or Arabic and improve my French, I was exhausted mentally. And so something I've always liked to do, and I do it as a teacher and give my students the opportunities to, is to have a space where
Mm-hmm.
they can take a break. And
Yeah.
normally we come up with a name. The students do. They vote on a name. They take ownership of it. And I loved going to that space as an adult and modeling when I was feeling frustrated or disappointed or stressed. And then I loved seeing them mimic, but then also make it their own. And I
Mhm.
think giving them that opportunity allows kids from any culture, any background, to develop metacognitive strategies that can, lead to success as future leaders, as adults.
Absolutely. I was thinking about how I always had a calming corner in my classroom. And it was a lot of posters. Sometimes it was manipulatives, but it was a space where kids could go if they were like, I'm out for a second, I need a moment. Because everybody needs that, right? Even as teachers, like we take a walk around and talk to our teacher friends because we need a moment. So
Yes, we do.
and then there's a lot that, as students, maybe we didn't have, growing up, but I really appreciate having like growth mindset posters in my classroom because they help me too. I look over and go like, okay, mistakes are proof that I'm trying. It's fine. I can get through this lesson. It's fine that I
Yes,
didn't have the right book or I didn't have the page marked or that kid is having something over there. But it's like we're all trying, and social emotional learning is just about recognizing where you are and where you want to be and finding the resources or the adults or the spaces or just the blowing air techniques that will help you get to the next place.
exactly. I couldn't agree more. It's so fun to learn through. I mean, there are plenty of experts in the field, and I love lapping up all their research and videos, but it is also personal. It's about your experience and your journey. And like you said, thinking about how we experienced elementary school was pretty different. And thinking about how I was as a child, I've had to, as a teacher, shed that expectation that every other kid would be exactly like I was as a student.
Hmm.
And so it's been a continuous journey of challenges and excitement and curiosity, and it's so
Hmm.
fun.
Do you think that social emotional learning is critical in the classroom of the future?
For sure. 100%. Um, I think I've been thinking about this a lot actually lately, of how education has been set up traditionally to like make productive humans, right? And one, that doesn't match with society. That's not how we live every day. Is not the goal, is not just to be productive. Two, it doesn't include a lot of people with neurodiversity, and the way our day is set up doesn't allow them to showcase their skills or reach their full potential. And I think if we were to move towards more fluid, flexible, interdisciplinary learning, I don't know, units or days, students would really be able to develop the social emotional competencies they need in the real world, such as collaborative skills, communication skills, empathy, critical thinking, problem solving. I mean, the list goes on and on. And, we grew up in a time where it was kind of like we were told it, we memorized it. I don't really remember being invited to think for myself. And
Hmm.
if I probably was, but I just wanted, the answer, which I think a lot of
Yeah.
kids these days also rely on people to tell them how to do things. So if we were to change the way school is set up, um, social emotional learning is paramount, and it would be part of everything we do.
And it's so much about being reflective, right? You know, a lot of companies ask their employees to think about feedback, think about their own journey. Where do they want to go in 5 years? That's what we're asking students to do. These are the same skills. So
Yes.
when we think about the future and how education is structured, we need to start seeing what are not just the jobs and the career paths, but the actual skill sets that we're asking
Hmm.
students to have.
Hmm. Totally. And I think it's even applicable through university. Sometimes we would
Mhm.
attend classes that are classes of like 200 plus students, and it's lecture. And yes, we might have been adults at the time, but that still might not engage us with ways to, or provide us opportunities to question in the moment. And those skills kind of go for the wayside that we can showcase in essays or in whatever other cumulative projects. So, yeah, I really think the whole system needs to be reformed.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons to have this podcast. Share the ideas
Uh-huh.
that are working so that people
Yeah.
know what's actually possible. You made me think about professional development because it's very similar to sitting in a university classroom. A lot of the times we sit in kind of a general space with all the other teachers from our school, and we learn from a lecturer, from a main speaker, or sometimes we're on a Zoom class and we learn from somebody modeling. But I at least have felt that there's not a lot of attention within professional development for the adult's social emotional growth and for the adult's individual needs and personalized education. So, what are your thoughts?
I agree. Depending on the context, sometimes it feels easier. Sometimes it's just more of, this is how we're going to do it. This is what we want you to do. It's useful. Do it.
Mhm.
But I think the most engaging professional development I've attended has been around social emotional learning and regulatory and those social emotional competencies. I I attended some trainings my first year as a teacher in Virginia on responsive classroom. And
Yes.
yeah, did you as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. The way it was set up, it just felt like we were part of the PD. We were, and we learned so much and reflected so much as we were going through it.
Hmm.
And opportunities in Brazil that we had when we had to, stand on what part of the compass we would be thinking about us as collaborators so that we could then learn about our teammates. All of those engaging activities, hands on, that's not just discussion, that are fun, that really makes a difference in, I think, our learning, our engagement, and how much we will take with us.
And thinking about our learners, just realizing like they don't know that other people don't think like them. They don't know that their way of identifying something might be totally different than someone else's perspective. And this happens a lot with conflicts, right?
Hmm.
They did this, but they can't take each other's perspective on it. But
Right.
when we do activities where it's like, what do you think? Or what would you like to share? Or what are you feeling right now? They get to
Hmm.
identify that I'm a unique human. I don't match with all of the colleagues in my class. And even though teachers say it, having them kind of feel it and believe it through those activities, it makes so much more of a difference.
Oh, for sure. That reminds me of something I did this year. I made it earlier in the year and don't know why I didn't introduce it until later in the year. But I was researching peace paths because this year and post pandemic social conflicts have been really high, and we modeled it. We modeled it with adults and with kids, and then it just kind of sat in the back of our classroom, but the kids knew where it was. And I never explicitly said you can go take out the peace path and solve your problems. But
Mhm.
I will never forget doing a DRA in the back of the room. And suddenly, like four kids come to the back. They don't interrupt, which is awesome. They go, they unroll the peace path, and they say, "We can solve it ourselves. Let's talk about it." And that I have goosebumps even
Yeah.
talking about it now. Seeing kids apply something you didn't explicitly teach them how, well, you taught them how to use it, but you didn't tell them go and do it. That was amazing. And that was really inspiring and hopeful, honestly.
It's giving them that ownership. It's empowering them to make decisions, to really say, I need this, and this is how I can get it. I think
Yeah.
even for creating a library in the classroom and the kids know they can go over to it whenever they want to have a book. or they
Yeah.
can go look at the posters around the room if they just want to do a walk around. I used to
Hmm.
have, especially in the last couple of years, because as you said, post pandemic has been different, kids who they just want to take a walk around the school. And, within the context of the elementary school campus and the space where they're definitely safe. But sometimes you just need to walk and kind of sit with your thoughts. So giving them opportunities to say, hey, I just need a walk. I'm getting really frustrated and I think I want to walk it out. Do it. Like, I'm always going to praise that kind of ownership of what you need.
And giving students that opportunity, which again, I don't think we were really given growing up
Yeah.
in schools, is, I totally agree, is amazing and helps them develop ownership, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the pandemic, and of course all the changes that have come with it, have you seen a rise in the need for social emotional skills and community building relationships within the classroom?
Yes, I was only teaching about 4.5 years before the pandemic. I noticed when we went back to in person but distanced learning, and after, there seems to be a higher need for teaching responsibility, for teaching um, coping strategies, self-regulating strategies, for conflict resolution strategies, and almost like awareness of others, because for so long kids were just with their families.
Uh, I used to see in my Zoom calls with first graders, like they'd be rolling on the floor. And I'm like, are you doing the math with us now?
My favorite was when a student brought their iPad into the bathroom with them. And that's where I just said, okay, we'll talk to you later.
During the pandemic and after, I saw so much more need for attention, personal attention, getting to know your teacher really well, getting that attention of like, you are my teacher and I have time with you. And some kids, they needed that, but they didn't know how to say it. And oftentimes we see behaviors as a space where kids are reacting to a lot of the emotions that they don't know how to process. They have
Yeah.
young brains, their brains are not fully developed, and they don't know what to do when they're feeling like everyone's pulling them in all the directions. They can't manage most of the things in their life because adults are managing them. So when kids misbehave, social emotional skills are definitely going to be helpful, but I don't know if they're the answer.
I think that teaching kids about our brains, which is something our curriculum, that we started to adopt last year, did, was a kind of a pivotal moment in my understanding of my own brain.
Right?
And yes, seriously.
We're
And
just
and
learning with them every day.
I mean, that's one of the benefits of being an educator. We learn with them and
True.
from them.
Mm-hmm.
But that was really important to allowing students to not rely on us for what to do. And that's not a social emotional skill per se. That's knowledge about how your brain works and what
Yeah,
goes
that's
on
the
in our
neuro.
bodies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I agree with you. It's not just one size fits all. This is going to work for everybody. This is what you have to do. No, there's a multitude of directions you can take when it comes to self-awareness, self-regulation, stimulation, all of it. So I agree.
I'm hoping in a future podcast to talk more about the neuroscience because, like you, I had that kind of awakening moment when, as an educator, I was learning about how the brain works. There is
Totally.
still something like when kids are able to say, my amygdala is overstressed right now, I need to just get out or I need to punch something. And you can be like, okay, you know where the cushions are. Like, there's so much more that happens in our classroom than just teaching math and literacy.
Just teaching critical thinking or just teaching breathing techniques is also not enough. It's how these skills interact in our daily lives, how they show themselves.
Yeah, and it's giving recognition to the kids who do show up and show those skills and model them in the classroom. So they recognize like, this is something that's helping me and I can keep doing it. It becomes a life skill.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm curious then, when you're thinking about all of the spaces in education, all the areas that really need attention, where do you think we should put our focus first? If I'm an educator going into class on Monday, what should be the first thing I really start changing? Because it's that 1% every day or every month that you just start making differences. So is it something with social emotional?
I've never really thought about that. I think it would start with first, as you wake up, being in tune with yourself
Mm.
and how you are feeling. Of course, we know that our job and our responsibility is to show up for kids. We also need to recognize that whatever we are carrying with us comes with us to school and could have a consequence, both positive and negative, on our days and interactions with our kids. So I think starting there and giving teachers the vulnerability and space to do that is amazing. I do think I really am an encourager of morning meetings. I think that if every classroom had a time sometime in the morning to connect and start their day together, it's a really strong bond that develops. That being said, this past year was the first time I really tried to have 5 to 10 minutes of a closing meeting. Sometimes it was not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that it really went full circle, and that allowed us, to reflect on our actions, our celebrations, our frustrations, our compliments throughout the day. And I think a model of education that is focused more on community rather than, individual effort would help a whole classroom of kids develop more empathy, more inclusive behaviors and thoughts and actions, and a stronger sense of belonging.
Mhm. I totally agree with you. I think morning meeting is so powerful, and the kids knowing it as a routine of like, I'm not starting at my desk worrying about something, but I'm starting sitting with a group of my peers, talking, sharing, identifying our feelings, which some kids are not going to do right off, but you can start it fun and goofy. There's so many ideas for great morning meetings. But just thinking about how you start your day and the energy you bring in and the energy that the kids have, it all comes together. And
Mm-hmm.
to create better relationships in the classroom, you have to start with the educator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. As we both know.
Yeah. And we've both struggled with, I mean, it's not an easy task. You have to
No.
really be in control of yourself and recognize that you leave your personal at the door, because
Mm-hmm.
this job takes a lot, but it's also the best job.
It's a growing opportunity. It's a roller coaster. It's so much, and it's very impactful for others, but also, like you said, for ourselves.
Yeah. I am at least grateful that we're teaching at this moment, because I think there are big changes happening in education that we are able to impact our students with, that we're able to implement into our classrooms, which maybe 10, 15 years ago weren't accessible.
I completely agree. It's an exciting time. And even outside, we can take these skills that we're learning as educators, or that we know as educators, and apply them to our nieces and nephews and children and friends' children and any child. And it's just such an enjoyable feeling to be able to know that we know we have these skills, we have this love for working with kids and invoking that interest in community and that excitement to show their true potential to the world.
I was going to say, especially community, because it's not just with students. making sure that adults feel empowered and that they can share what's happening with them emotionally and socially, and make sure that their needs are being heard and articulated correctly. So when you have educator skills, it goes across a wide spectrum of areas. It's not just in education.
Great point, Christina. I agree.
When we're thinking about the future, is there something that you really hope happens by 2050 in education that you'd be able to say, that's the thing that I really wanted to see?
Okay, so 2050, that's in like 27 years, right? Oh, you know, by 2050, I hope that education is seen as a tool and a strength rather than babysitting or child watching. I hope that parents and communities recognize the value of equitable education for all students of all backgrounds. And I hope that everyone has access to the resources, to the love, to the passion they need in order to thrive.
Very well said. I totally agree. I think there are many things that I hope to see in education, but access and a higher level of authority within the profession, to do the expert jobs that educators do. Recognition is only part of it, but making sure that kids have access to really great educators, no matter where they are, no matter what their circumstance. That's part of my vision.
Yeah. And to get there are so many steps that need to
Always.
happen. But if we make that a goal and have so many like-minded people working together, then hopefully the system would be able to transform and make that happen.
Exactly. There's always a possibility.
Yes.
Is there anything else we haven't mentioned that you want to talk about in regards to education in the future?
You know, there have been many times as a teacher and as a person in our world today, and all the events, the catastrophic events, the sad events, the monumental and positive events too, that I've wavered with my connection and my purpose as wanting to be an educator and working with kids. But an experience that has touched my heart was this last June, when the last full day of school, our community, our class said goodbye to a very wonderful student. And every child was able to say something specific that they loved about this student. And when it got to the last child, he broke down and cried. And that made so many other kids, including myself, cry. And I think that shows that there's hope in the world. There's hope with these kids that we are spending time and dedicated to trying to encourage and motivate to change the world. So if we can all find moments to lift each other up and encourage each other and, hear each other, I think education and the future will be a brighter place.
That sounds so wonderful. There's so much with relationship building that can happen in a classroom. And I think you're right. Social emotional learning is just a piece of it. But if educators go into their classrooms on Monday morning and think about, how am I connecting to each kid? How am I creating that personal connection between each kid as well? That we could definitely have a better future.
Yeah. Thank you so much for
Yay.
having me today, Christina. It's been so fun.
Thank you, Michaela. I want to end with just telling you a note of gratitude, because you taught so many second graders who came into my third grade class. And I don't think they would have been the same third graders that I got to experience if it hadn't been for all the work that you did with them. So thank you for paving the way for them to have a great time in third grade and hopefully now fourth and fifth and whatever that they've gone on to.
Well, thank you so much. That's so kind. I appreciate it.
Thank you for joining, Michaela. Hope you have a great day.
You too. Bye, Christina.
If you've been inspired and or finished your coffee, let us know by liking, subscribing, and of course, telling a friend to listen to the Premium Quality Ideas podcast. And if you've made it this far, you've earned a question to ponder. Who impacted your social emotional growth the most and how? That's all for today. Thank you for joining me for Premium Quality Ideas. I'm Christina. Ciao!